Vicki. I use she, her pronouns, and I grew up in Portland, Oregon. Yeah, I grew up in a pretty affluent and white neighborhood. So I think one thing that's been really interesting for me as I've moved to New York City and I live in Chinatown now is I think I had like internalized a lot of feelings of like not belonging but wanting to fit in because my family was very different than most of the people that I grew up around. But it was like a really good atmosphere. I think like I was lucky to always go to really excellent schools, and I think I feel really grateful that I grew up in a community where I think there were like expectations that you would go to college and be able to find a good job. And I think that was always kind of like a given, which is why my family chose to move there. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I didn't meet other Chinese people, other Asian people, like people of color until I went to college, um, which was a really bizarre experience, to be honest. And so I think like rediscovering that and like reclaiming that identity was a big part of like how I grew after moving out of Portland. Um, and so I think, you know, it's, I think there are unfortunately like upsides to growing up in a really white community because you kind of like in some ways have access to a lot of the like privilege and resources, and you also learn how to operate in that world, and I think that's been really useful. But I am very glad now that I like am no longer in that environment because I don't think it's healthy. And now I'm really like proud of where my parents come from and our culture and our background in a way that I don't think I was like able to express when I was growing up. Yeah, I think I very much like wanted to be white when I was younger, which is like a difficult thing to come to grasps with now because I think there is a lot of like hurt in that, obviously, to like want something different, to like want a different family. But especially when you're young, I think like all you want is to fit in. You just want to like be like everyone else. And so I really disliked all of the things that made me and my family different. So my like sister and I, we wouldn't speak Mandarin at home. We would like speak English with our parents. I remember in like middle school, I feel like this is like a classic, like child of immigrant story, but like I would ask my mom to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we like had this whole argument because she was like, I don't understand what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is. That like sounds disgusting. What are these things? Because she was making like what honestly is delicious food, like dumplings, noodles, like rice and like chicken. But I was like, I can't bring that to school. Yeah, I think it was great. At first, it was jarring for me, to be honest, because I was so used to being around exclusively white people that at first I was like, I had this feeling of being uncomfortable in like rooms or just in settings where like most people were not white, and it like took me time to get used to that. But I think it was like a one-way bridge where now I like can't go back, because I think there is a kind of like comfort and ease that comes with being in a space where it's like okay to not be trying to assimilate, or I think there's like more of a feeling of just like shared understanding. There are things that are like okay to talk about. There are like shared experiences that you can have. You can talk like about white people. It's like a whole conversation you can have. So I think I'm like really glad that I was like able to have that. And I think also it helped me develop like a political identity as an Asian American person. Because I think something else that I had struggled with was kind of, being someone who cared a lot about like racial justice, wanting to like be in the fight for Black liberation, but not understanding like what my place in that was as like an Asian person, because I think it felt like conversations about race focused on either like whiteness or Blackness. And so I'm also really grateful that I found communities to kind of help understand like that there is an Asian experience, that like we do have shared struggles, and there are ways for us to like use that to like be in solidarity together. So I think that's also something that has been really meaningful for me. Yeah, I actually started in tech very young. When I was in middle school, I think, like towards the end of being in middle school, I joined like a robotics team that we had at our school with some friends of mine. So that's kind of how I first got into like coding and technology, and then like kept doing that throughout high school. So I like got a very early start, which I think can be a real privilege. I actually, for the longest time, I like really loved like doing tech stuff. Like I loved programming. I thought it was super fun, but I never thought it was going to be my career because I really wanted to work in like, I don't know, like human rights, social impact work. And at the time I was like, oh, that means I have to, like study political science or be a lawyer or something like that. And I think it wasn't until I was talking to some people that I knew who were like doing political work, and the thing that they told me was that it's actually like most useful for you to have that technical skill set because that's what like a lot of this kind of work needs. Like even if that's what you want to do eventually, like you might be better positioned to do it if you come in with like the technical background, if you like are an engineer. So that's kind of what motivated me to like study computer science in college. I was like, all right, I want to, study this, learn how to like be a good engineer, get these skills, and then hopefully figure out a way to like make that work for the things that I care about, which is still what I'm in the process of figuring out. Yeah, I think it's because I was around so much privilege. I was always really aware of the fact that like my background and my family's background was like so different than most of the people that I grew up with. Like they had all, I think mostly like obviously like been in the US for many generations. Their, parents and parents were all college educated, had like high paying jobs. These were all just like things that were so normal to them and things that they were so used to. And I think for me, I felt like I was very aware that that's actually like not that normal and that's like not something that everyone has. And so to me, it felt really important to try and make it so that it is something that's normal, that everybody can grow up knowing that they have a future, that they can, like live a good life and provide for themselves and their family. And I think because I was kind of in this position of being able to see it a little bit from a distance, it felt like something that was really meaningful, where I was like, wow, I can see like what a good life can be because I'm like in this place where people are living it. But I also know that this is like not how most people in this country, even much less like the world at large, live. And like that's not right. Yeah, I think it definitely can be a little bit isolating to be a woman in tech because there like aren't as many women in tech. I think that is changing, but I think more so than like the feeling of, being the only person in the room, that thing that was always grating for me is kind of like the tech culture, which I think is very much influenced by the fact that it is mostly white, mostly male. I think that there are a lot of assumptions about why people get into tech, right? Like it's a lot of times there's this feeling that if you work in tech, it has to be like your whole lifeblood. Like you have to eat, sleep, breathe coding and programming. And even if you're not working, you should be like reading technical blogs and going to meetups, and like that should be your whole life. And that has like never interested me because, I got into technology because I wanted to ultimately use it to do other things. And also like my community is important to me, like doing community work is important. So like my software engineering job is never going to be my whole life. And I think negotiating those boundaries and feeling also like I got to a place where I felt comfortable asserting them, I think was a big like probably the biggest challenge, because I think when you're trying to get into tech, there's a lot of messaging that says that you can't make it, or that you like have to adapt to like their way of operating in order to make it. And I think I don't think that's true. And so for me, like finding places to work where I felt supported, and also finding a group of people who are in technology but not like kind of your quintessential tech bros, I think helped me a lot to be like, you know, this can just be my 9 to 5, and I'll like do a good job and I enjoy it a lot and I'm like glad to have this job, but like that's it, and that's fine, and it doesn't make me like less smart or less worthy or less deserving of being in this industry. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I hope that it becomes something. I think you're right? Like right now there's definitely kind of like an underclass of tech workers, right? Like contractors, delivery drivers, gig workers, people who are like basically exploited for technology companies. And then there's like an upper class of like software engineers, product managers who earn like much, much higher wages and just like have much better work situations, have a lot more privilege and power. And I mean, I hope that we can change the industry so that there isn't this like hierarchy. I don't know how we do that, but I think there are a lot of exciting things. Like I think worker cooperatives are really exciting. I think a lot of the like organizing within companies that includes like gig workers and contractors and software engineers is good. And I think also there are like ways, excuse me, ways in which the barrier to entry sometimes is like being lowered. And I think those are really exciting, like no code tools and ways to like build things with technology that maybe don't require that you've like done a year of boot camp or, you know, done a whole degree program. So I think that the tools in a lot of ways are there, but it's just kind of like fighting the power and the system that I think doesn't want, right, for everyone to necessarily have good jobs, doesn't want to give all of their workers benefits. But I would love to see that from the tech industry. Because yeah, I don't want it to be a thing where you have to like fight and claw your way in at other people's expense. I think that there's like, in theory, a lot of room to make the pie bigger so that like we can all, you know, live good lives. Oh my gosh, I don't actually remember how I first heard about Emergent Works. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. I think, well, I moved to New York City after I graduated from college, and I was like looking for kind of like organizations to get involved with, both I think to like do something with my non-work time, but also kind of looking for a community that felt aligned. And an issue that I cared a lot about and still care a lot about, obviously, is like mass incarceration and kind of trying to do what I can to disrupt that system. And so I was looking in particular at like what are the organizations in New York City that are doing work to work with either like currently or formerly incarcerated people. And so I think Emergent Works came up and I was like, wow, this is kind of perfect. Like I am a software engineer, I have this skill set, I like can do this. And so I think like the timing just didn't work out for the cohort that was happening at the time. But then like a year later, I think I like got the email about the cohort that I did sign up for, and like the mentorship opportunity worked out. And so I was really, really excited because I'd been kind of like following Emergent Works for a little bit. I was kind of a fangirl. I was like, oh, they seem like they do such awesome work. Like I would love to be a part of this. And since then it's been like such a, I don't know, I feel really grateful to like have been able to be a part of this community. It's been really meaningful for me. My mentee's name's Makita. She's amazing. I mean, I think working with her has been a total privilege. Honestly, like my job as her mentor is extremely easy because Makita is so smart and so driven, and I think like really knows what she wants and has like really clear goals. She wants to, make a career out of programming, become a software engineer, get a job so she can support her daughter and her grandson. And, she has like a background also in teaching, which sometimes makes it easy for us as like a mentor and a mentee, because she really understands like what we're trying to do together. And for me, it's super easy, right? Like Nikita does all of the hard work. She's like studying, putting in tons of hours. Lately, I feel like my job has been to try and encourage her to like rest and take time for herself. But she had done a program called Justice Through Code, where she learned like basic Python and built a little project. So when we started working together, Makita already like knew a lot of the basic programming concepts. And so what we focused on was getting her ready for the Hack Reactor exam, because you have to take this technical assessment before you can get into the Hack Reactor bootcamp, which is kind of the step towards eventually landing a software engineering job. So we just spent time like learning JavaScript, kind of tightening up some of the concepts that she was already familiar with, and just practicing, going through the exam. And I think a lot of times my role was just like, if something wasn't totally clicking, being there to kind of walk through it, or maybe like explain things in a slightly different way that helped it to make more sense. And then I think a lot of it was also just kind of like being on her team. And I think that's what Emergent Works does a lot, because it is hard. They like make it hard for people to get into the tech industry. It can feel really discouraging. I think there's a lot of subliminal messaging that it's complicated and confusing, and if you don't get it, you can't make it. And so I think a lot of what the mentors do and what Emergent Works does is to say like, no, you can do this. You like are smart. You're doing the work. You like are fully capable of doing this. And to learn that like part of being a software engineer is running into stuff that you don't understand, running into problems. And the biggest thing is just learning how to work through those. And I think that's like the biggest skill set that we've been working on together, is like when you run into a problem, having the confidence to know like, I can figure this out. It's just a matter of time before I do. I think some parts of it are really rewarding, but I think also frustrating. Like it does upset me that it's been so hard for her. Like I don't think it should be this hard. I think Nikita has put a lot of her life on hold, like had less time to spend with her family. She's been stressed. Sometimes she doesn't sleep well. Those are all things that I think like should never happen. And like that shouldn't be what it takes to get into the tech industry. But at the same time, I am like really glad when I see that she's enjoying things. I think that I've seen her become a lot more confident in her skills as a programmer, which makes me really happy, because I think that's the biggest thing, is her getting to a place where she can see kind of like what I see, where I'm like, she's so smart. She like is really, I think, naturally talented at a lot of what the work is. And so I have like that full faith, and hopefully I think seeing her build more of that does give me a lot of joy, because I think that's like what it's about. I think that's the dream, that's the goal.
Do you believe that diversity can increase productivity in the tech industry?
It's a good question. I think so, but I also personally don't always like the framing of diversity as being important because it increases productivity. I think that companies should be diverse and aim to hire people of different backgrounds, because it's like the right thing to do. Like the positioning of like, oh, we need like more people of color, more formerly incarcerated folks so we can like meet our OKRs. Like that feels extractive. It feels tokenizing. Like I don't it just has never sit super well with me. And like, even if it were to make your team less productive, it's still what you should do, you know? So yeah. I think that there's so much that we are taught as a society about punishment and like good and bad people. And I think that we're taught those things, right, because they enforce this system of incarceration, which to me is, it feels a lot, right, just like a continuation of slavery, right? It's like a way to keep a certain group of people from accessing full lives where you are empowered. And I think that popular society has to demonize formerly incarcerated folks for the system to continue, which is really sick and perverse. And that's why recidivism is so high, right? Because they don't actually want people to succeed. They want people to go back into the system. And so that's why it's so hard, and why, you know, at Emergent Works, you have to do so much work to actually provide the support that should be there for people who probably shouldn't even be incarcerated in the first place. You know, like, I don't know. I don't believe in prisons. I don't think that people belong in cages. I don't believe in punishment. But yeah, I think that like that there's so much that people are taught to think that people are like evil or bad or fundamentally different than they are, when of course that's not true. But I think that that's like a necessary lie that we have to buy into. Otherwise, you start to see the way in which the system is just about cruelty and just about oppression. I mean, I think in 5 years, I feel like we'll just have like a bigger, stronger community. And I think one of the things that's really exciting, right, is that there will be mentors who have come through the program. You know, like I feel like my mentee, Makita, will be mentoring other people, will be bringing them in, giving them opportunities. And I think, you know, realistically, like that's a much better mentorship experience than I could ever provide, because she's going to understand things and like know where people are coming from in a way that, even though I try, I just like will never fully grasp. So I think that's something that's really exciting. And I think also, you know, as we build this community that centers people and that is really caring, I think there's also the potential to like change the industry. You know, like folks from Emergent Works are going to be in technology companies, are going to be on teams with this ethic. And we know that you can, you know, be in the industry, you can do this work and still care for people, still like have community centered. And I think, you know, ultimately, I hope that Emergent Works, you know, changes the culture of the tech industry so that there aren't so many hoops to jump through, so that it's not so hard for people to break in. And, you know, I think ideally, like, this community is great, but I think that it shouldn't require so much work for us to be able to give people, or for us to be able to place people in opportunities that they can rise to. So I think, you know, further than 5 years out, I feel like it would be great for Emergent Works to not have to do this work, right? For it to be like easy and automatic. But I think until then, I'm excited for kind of the stuff that the community builds to get there. I don't know. I think right now I am still kind of on the career side, like working on developing my skills as a software engineer, like getting more experience, feeling like I know what I'm doing. And I think I'm still thinking a lot about, you know, what does it mean to be a technologist and also really care about like movement work? How do those things intersect, if they do at all? So I think those are questions that I'm thinking about, and I don't have any good answers, but I think we'll take it as it comes. My name is Vicki. I'm a former mentor and proud member of the Emergent Works family, and I believe that excellence in code can come from anyone.